Welcome back to lecture number 78. Today we are talking about historical topic 8.4, the economy after 1945. Our theme is work, exchange, and technology. And then we're also going to have a second theme, that's migration and settlement. That means that there are going to be two learning objectives. The first learning objective is going to be explain the causes of economic growth in the years after World War II. The College Board is going to give us several different reasons in this key concept. That's a bourgeois private sector, federal spending, the baby boom, and technological developments helped spur economic growth. We're going to go through each of these and then decide which one is the most important. So the bourgeois private sector is private companies that are able to sell more products and therefore make more profit and then hire more people, continuing the cycle upwards. At this point, there's little competition from foreign manufacturers. Remember, after World War II, any country that would have been a competitor in manufacturing is rebuilding because of the destruction that was brought about by the war. Additionally, the Taft-Hartley Act is passed in 1947. This outlaws the closed shop union model, meaning that before you are hired for a certain job, a union cannot make it a requirement for you to join their union before you're given that job. And there are other requirements that are listed in the Taft-Hartley Act that are meant to limit the power of unions. States can start passing rights to work laws to, again, limit the size of unions. This is going to help the private sector because now producers can increase their profits without increasing the wages for their workers. The two charts that you see on the screen, one shows you union membership as a percentage of all workers in the United States, and since the passage of the Taft-Hartley Act in 1947, you see that there is a trend downwards, that there are fewer workers as a whole, and also in proportion to the entire labor force that are parts of unions. And then the other one is showing you in relation to income inequality. So the blue line is showing you the percentage of income received by the top 1%, and the red line is showing you the growth and the decline of unions, and it shows you the correlation that anytime that unions membership goes up, that the income received by the top 1% goes down. This is most likely because unions are able to collectively bargain for higher wages, and then those higher wages are keeping the top 1% of the economy, the factory owners, from keeping more of those profits. And private sectors also going to benefit a lot from government programs that's going to create higher demand from consumers. It's going to put money in people's pockets, so they're going to be more likely to buy the products of what the manufacturers are. So let's talk about those government spending programs that are going to help people have more money to spend. The first and the biggest one is the GI Bill that was signed into law by Franklin Roosevelt. You can see him behind his desk there, putting a signature on the bill. This is meant to help all of the returning veterans from World War II. Most of them were young men who had to leave whatever they were doing at home and drop it for going to fight the war. Now, when they returned, they wanted to have some sort of service for them so that they could easily be reintroduced into the economy. If you had all of the service members come back at once, it would put a lot of strain in the economy. People would start to lose hope that they may not be able to find a job as soon as they come in. And so it gives 1 year of unemployment benefits to all of the returning veterans. It gives them access to low interest mortgage loans, which is going to help the economy by aiding the construction industry. And it's also going to give them access to college tuition. We'll talk about some of the deficiencies with the GI Bill because the GI Bill had to comply with the Jim Crow systems of the southern states. And so white returning veterans had a disproportionate access to the benefits given by the GI Bill than did the black returning veterans. Moving on to Eisenhower, he's going to expand Social Security. That, again, is giving more money to retired people that are over the age of 65 and is allowing them to buy more goods. He passes the 1956 Federal Highway Act, which is going to aid the construction industry again, connect cities Using 2-lane and 4-lane highways leads to more jobs, more car sales, and it acts as a subsidy for suburbs because now people who lived in the suburbs are going to have a guaranteed transportation routes between themselves and the places where they normally work in the city. The New Frontier programs by JFK and the Great Society program by LBJ were focusing on tax cuts on the middle class. That's going to lead to an increase in consumer spending. And then by the time that we get to the 1970s and the OPEC oil crisis, the United States is going to go through an economic slowdown. And this is a period of stagflation. This is when the economy stops growing, so it is stagnant, it's standing still. And at the same time, there is inflation. Now, this is problematic because the way in which you solve inflation is also the one way in which the unemployment rate could go up. And the way in which you solve the unemployment and the economic slowdown is going to make inflation worse. So the government had to choose which problem it was going to tackle first, and they ended up trying to tackle inflation, which is going to drive up unemployment. So the 1970s, not such a great time economically for the United States. At the same time, the other countries like Germany and Japan that were rebuilding after the war are now big industrial powerhouses. So now there are international competitors for manufacturers. All right, the baby boom. About 50 million people are born between 1945 and 1960. This generation is going to be more accustomed to having women work outside the home. And so if there's more workers out in the economy, then that means that the economy is also going to grow larger. For technological developments, there are new consumer goods which increase the standard of living seen in most American homes. In Nixon's kitchen debate with Nikita Khrushchev of the Soviet Union, Richard Nixon, as vice president, was trying to show people in the Soviet Union that the United States or common Americans had washers and dryers, refrigerators, stoves in their homes, which made life a lot easier. And it's these consumer goods that are driving economic growth in those areas because people always want to get to the best new appliance. And so as they continue to spend money, it's going to fuel the economy. There's also going to be technologies that are being bought by the US government from private companies. So there is going to be a new space industry that's going to develop with the creation of NASA. And NASA is going to buy components for their rockets and spaceships and everything that they might need from private manufacturers. And so it's going to make certain communities really dependent on the government spending on these new technologies. And then also in the defense industry, like the Lockheed Corporation, they made airplanes during World War II, and they are going to continue building new weapons, new airplanes that are going to be used in the buildup of arms during the Cold War. All right, second learning objective for this lecture is explain the causes and effects of the migration of various groups of Americans after 1945. So as higher education opportunities and new technologies rapidly expanded, increasing social mobility encouraged the migration of the middle class to the suburbs and of many Americans to the South and West. The Sun Belt region emerged as a significant political and economic force. So there is a higher education opportunities. We saw this through the GI Bill. It gives about 7 million returning veterans post-secondary training. About 5 million of those went to a traditional four-year college. 2 million of those veterans took advantage of some other type of vocational training that was post-secondary. But again, we see a deficiency here because not all black veterans have the same access to education as the white veterans. The college tuition may have been covered, but because of discrimination and segregation in higher education, black veterans were not able to go to all of the same colleges that the white veterans could. So they were relegated to historically black colleges and universities, and because of the influx of all of these students, they became overcrowded, and it was likely that they received a lesser education because they were not able to go to the same colleges and universities that white veterans were able to go to. With the suburbs, we had planned communities like Levittown. So William Levitt was the developer here that designed these suburbs, and they were pretty cookie cutter looking houses that were generally pretty similar in layout and in semblance or facade, and that was due to trying to save money. Now, these Levitt towns, or any community designed by Levitt, did not allow homes to be sold to African American families. And so again, this is giving an unequal chance to build wealth for white Americans than it is to black Americans. Even the mortgage loans that were being offered or insured by the federal government, they would not insure any loans in areas where black Americans lived. This was called redlining. And so you see what a map of redlining looked like on the bottom left. And then finally, the growth of the Sun Belt, the south and the west of the United States. We have warmer climates, lower taxes, and employment in defense industries that is attracting people from other parts of the United States to these areas. And as more people move into these states, then their population grows. And as population grows, due to the census and the reapportionment process that happens every 10 years, politically, these states are going to be more important. Richard Nixon in the 1968 election had an entire Southern strategy in which he was trying to gain all of the electoral votes of the Southern states. And you can see why being part of this migration to the Sun Belt would have influenced his decision to go that route. And finally, a recap. Here we go. The United States economy continued to grow through the post-war period, primarily due to the government spending and the growing private sector. These are two really important reasons as to why the economy grew. Stagflation in the 1970s shows us the first signs of an economic slowdown in the United States. And finally, the economic growth was paralleled with the growth of the suburbs and the Sun Belt. All right, thank you for watching this lecture. Please come back and I'll see you on the next one.